The first thing that should have warned me was the silence, not the peaceful kind you find in quiet places. This was the heavy, unnatural kind of silence that makes every sound feel louder than it should be. The kind where even your own footsteps feel like they don't belong. I didn't think much about it at the time. I had just driven nearly 6 hours to get back to the town I grew up in, and honestly, I was already regretting the trip. I never liked my hometown. It was one of those tiny places buried miles away from anything interesting. No real city nearby, no highways running through it, nothing new ever being built. Most of the houses looked like they had been there since the 70s, and most of the people living there had been there just as long. The only reason I ever came back was because my two brothers still lived there. A few of my old friends did too. Normally, when I visited, I stayed with one of my brothers. But this year, things were different. Both of them had girlfriends who had recently moved in with them, and I didn't really feel like being the awkward extra person sleeping on someone's couch while they tried to live their lives. So instead, I decided to stay at the town's only hotel. Calling it a hotel might actually be generous. It sat right off the gravel highway near the edge of town, a small rectangular building with faded paint and a single flickering light above the entrance. I don't even remember seeing a real sign, just the word hotel in old metal letters. When I pulled into the parking lot, I immediately noticed how empty it was. There was only one vehicle there, an old pickup truck parked near the side of the building. That was it. No other cars, no people. I told myself it wasn't strange. The town barely had a population to begin with, and it wasn't exactly a tourist destination. Still, something about the place felt off. When I walked inside, the lobby was dimly lit by a single lamp sitting on the front desk. An older man suddenly stood up from a chair behind the counter when he noticed me. He looked like he might have been in his 60s. His beard was rough and uneven, and his gray hair stuck out in random directions like he hadn't brushed it in days. For a second, he just stared at me, almost like I had startled him. Then he spoke. "Need a room?" His voice was low and gravelly, like someone who didn't talk much. I said yes. He didn't ask for an ID, didn't ask me to sign anything. He just reached under the counter, grabbed a key attached to a plastic number tag, and handed it to me. Then he stepped out from behind the desk and slowly walked down the hallway, motioning for me to follow. The hallway was narrow and smelled faintly like old carpet and cleaning chemicals. The lighting was weak, and the walls had that dull yellow color that older buildings always seem to have. We stopped at the last room at the very end of the hall. He unlocked it, handed me the key, and said, "You'll be fine here." Then he walked away before I could even say thanks. The room itself wasn't terrible, just small. There was a single bed in the center, an old dresser against the wall, and a television that looked like it was at least 20 years old. It didn't really matter to me, though. I wasn't planning to spend much time there anyway. I left most of my bags packed, took a quick shower, and went to bed. Sometime during the night, I woke up. At first, I didn't know why. Then I heard it, knocking, not on my door. It sounded like it was coming from somewhere farther down the hallway. Slow, spaced out, dull thuds. Knock, then silence, then another knock. For a moment, I just lay there, listening through the thin walls. The sound reminded me of an old wooden door being pushed open and hitting a frame. I considered getting up to check, but honestly, I was exhausted. I eventually rolled over and fell back asleep. The next morning, I walked to the lobby, hoping to grab some coffee before heading out to see my brothers. But the lobby was empty. No coffee machine, no breakfast setup, not even the old man behind the desk. The lamp was still on, but the chair he had been sitting in was empty. I waited a minute, then shrugged and left. I spent most of the day with my brothers and a couple friends, catching up and driving around town. It wasn't until around 9 that night that I returned to the hotel. Once again, the parking lot was completely empty, except for the same pickup truck. Inside, the building felt even quieter than before. The lights in the lobby were off now. I walked down the hallway toward my room, unlocked the door, and started changing into more comfortable clothes. That's when I heard it again. The same knocking sound. But this time, it was closer. It sounded like it was coming from right outside my room. I slowly walked over and cracked the door open just enough to look into the hallway. At first, I didn't see anything. Then I noticed the door to the room next to mine was slightly open. Before I could look any closer, the old man's voice suddenly called out from somewhere down the hallway. "Hey!" I jumped. "Come down to the lobby for a minute." Before I could respond, I heard his footsteps walking away. I hesitated for a few seconds, wondering what he wanted. Maybe there was some kind of issue with the room. So I stepped out and walked down the hallway. When I reached the lobby, the lights were still off, and the old man wasn't there. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds listening. Nothing. No footsteps. No movement. Just silence. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. Something about the place suddenly felt wrong. I turned around and quickly walked back to my room. That night, I stayed awake for hours, expecting to hear something else. But the hallway stayed completely quiet. The next day, I mentioned the hotel to my friends. They all looked confused. One of them asked, "Wait, that place is open again?" "What do you mean?" I asked. Another friend said he thought the hotel had closed a year or two earlier. Apparently, the owners had moved away. No one had been running it since. I laughed it off at first. That couldn't be right. I had literally checked in there. Someone had given me a key. The electricity worked. The water worked. It made no sense. Still, the conversation stuck in my head the rest of the day. That night, when I drove back, the parking lot looked exactly the same, empty, except for the old truck. I walked inside slowly this time. The lobby lights were off again. The building felt colder somehow. When I reached my room, I stopped. My door was slightly open. I knew I had locked it. My heart started pounding. I pushed the door open just enough to see inside. Everything looked the same. My suitcase was still on the bed. I ran inside, grabbed it, and left the rest of my stuff behind. Toothbrush, charger, everything. I didn't care. Something deep in my gut told me I needed to leave. Fast. I hurried down the hallway toward the exit. Just before reaching the lobby, I glanced back, and that's when I saw him. The old man was standing in the doorway of my room, just staring at me, not moving, not speaking, just watching. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached my car. I drove straight to my brother's house and told him everything. He convinced me to call the police. When officers checked the hotel later that night, they found something strange. The building really was closed. No employees, no records, no one living there. And the old pickup truck I had seen every night, it was gone. The police never found anyone. They also didn't seem convinced my story was real. But I know what I saw. And the worst part is thinking about how close I might have been to staying there one more night. Because something about that place tells me I wasn't supposed to leave. If that story gave you chills, make sure you subscribe right now because the next story gets even more disturbing. But before we move on, I want to ask you something. If you were in that situation, would you have stayed in that place or would you have left immediately? Because honestly, something about that entire situation just doesn't feel right. Let me know what you think down in the comments. I read as many of them as I can. When I think back on that night, the part that scares me the most isn't what I saw. It's what I didn't see. Because if I had noticed it just a little earlier, I probably wouldn't have been trapped inside that cabin with him all day. Last Christmas, I took a few days off work to visit my family. Instead of staying in the city where my parents lived, we planned to meet at our old family cabin. It sat deep in the mountains a few hours south, surrounded by miles of forest. My parents had owned the place since I was a kid, and we used to spend holidays there almost every year. The cabin itself was simple. Just a small wooden house with 2 bedrooms, a living room with a stone fireplace, and a porch that overlooked the trees. No neighbors nearby, no road noise, just quiet woods stretching in every direction. Normally, we all arrived around the same time, but this trip was a little different. Because of work schedules and travel plans, I ended up arriving a full day before the rest of my family. At first, that sounded perfect, a full day alone in the mountains with nothing to do but relax. I got there in the late afternoon, right as the sky was beginning to turn orange behind the tree line. The air was cold, and a light dusting of snow covered the ground around the cabin. Inside, the place looked just like I remembered. Dusty, but untouched. I walked through each room, turning on lights and opening windows for a bit to let fresh air in. After driving most of the day, I took a long hot shower, made a quick dinner, and went to bed earlier than usual. The silence out there made it easy to fall asleep. The next morning, I woke up early. Sunlight filtered through the windows, reflecting off the thin layer of snow outside. It looked peaceful, exactly what I had hoped for when planning the trip. I made a cup of coffee and decided to take a walk. There was an old trail behind the cabin that my family had used for years. It wasn't anything official, just a narrow dirt path worn down from decades of hiking. The trail looped through the woods for a couple miles before eventually circling back toward the cabin. With my coffee in one hand and my jacket zipped up against the cold, I started down the path. The forest was incredibly quiet. Not even birds, just the occasional sound of wind brushing through the branches above me. For the first half mile, everything felt normal. Then I noticed something strange in the snow. Footprints. At first, I thought they were animal tracks, maybe from a deer or something similar. But when I crouched down and looked closer, I realized they were definitely human. Clear shoe prints. And they looked fresh. The snow had fallen during the night, which meant whoever made those tracks had walked through the area sometime that morning. That didn't make much sense. The cabin property was surrounded by private land and forest. The nearest hiking trail was miles away, and there were no other cabins close enough for someone to casually wander over here. I stood there for a minute, scanning the woods around me. Nothing moved. The forest looked completely empty. Still, something about those prints made me uneasy. After another minute of debating whether I should keep walking, I decided to turn around and head back to the cabin. It wasn't worth running into some random stranger out there in the middle of nowhere. As I walked back along the trail, I tried convincing myself it was probably just a hunter or someone exploring the woods. But the uneasy feeling stayed with me. When the cabin finally came into view through the trees, I felt relieved. That relief lasted about 2 seconds. Because when I got closer to the front porch, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. More footprints. These ones were fresh too, and they led straight to the front door. I knew for a fact those prints hadn't been there earlier, which meant someone had walked up to the cabin while I was out on the trail. I quickly looked around the property. The snow-covered forest stretched out in every direction. Empty, no movement, no sounds, just silence. After standing there for a moment, I hurried inside and locked the door. My heart was pounding. I told myself the most logical explanation was that someone had come up to check if the cabin was abandoned. Maybe they saw the trail and got curious. Maybe they even looked through the windows and realized someone was staying there. That explanation helped a little, but not much. I called my parents to let them know what had happened. My mom immediately sounded worried. She suggested I pack up and stay at a hotel in the nearest town until they arrived the next day. But the town was over an hour away, and honestly, I didn't feel like driving that far unless I absolutely had to. So I decided to stay. Looking back, that was probably the worst decision I made that day. The rest of the afternoon passed slowly. I stayed inside the cabin with the doors locked, keeping an eye on the windows every so often. Nothing happened. No sounds outside. No more footprints appearing near the cabin. As evening approached, the sky darkened quickly and the temperature dropped even lower. I started a fire in the fireplace and sat in the living room with another cup of coffee. Despite the warm fire, I couldn't fully relax. Every creak of the cabin made me look up. Every gust of wind outside made my heart skip for a moment. Eventually, night fell. The forest outside the windows turned into a wall of darkness. I kept thinking about those footprints, and the more I thought about them, the more one question kept bothering me. Where did they go? I had only seen the tracks leading to the door. I had never checked to see if they led away. That realization suddenly felt important. Maybe seeing the tracks leaving would finally prove that whoever it was had already gone. So I grabbed a flashlight and walked to the front door. When I opened it, cold air rushed inside. The forest looked even darker at night. The beam from my flashlight barely reached the edge of the porch. I aimed the light down toward the snow. The footprints were still there, clear as ever. They led right up to the front door. I followed them with the flashlight beam, searching for where they continued. But they didn't. There were no footprints leading away. None at all. They stopped at the doorway, and suddenly the realization hit me like a punch to the chest. The cabin had been unlocked when I left for my walk, which meant whoever made those footprints could have simply walked inside. I slowly turned around. The living room was dimly lit by the orange glow of the fireplace. For a moment, everything looked normal. Then I heard something, a faint creak from down the hallway. My heart nearly stopped. I leaned forward just enough to see down the hall toward the bedrooms. One of the bedroom doors was open, and a man was standing there, half in the shadows, watching me. For a second, neither of us moved. Then the moment he realized I had seen him, he sprinted toward me. Adrenaline kicked in instantly. I grabbed my car keys from the hook by the door and ran outside. I didn't even bother shutting the door behind me. I jumped into my car and sped down the narrow road leading away from the cabin. I didn't stop driving until I reached the nearest town. From there, I went straight to the police station. Officers drove back with me to check the cabin, but when we arrived, the place was empty. The man was gone. They searched the rooms carefully and eventually found scuff marks inside the bedroom closet. Based on the evidence, they believed he had been hiding in there the entire day, waiting for me to fall asleep. The thought of that still makes my skin crawl, because it means he was inside that cabin with me the entire time, while I was drinking coffee, sitting by the fire, and thinking I was alone. The police never figured out who he was, and they never found him. Sometimes I still think about how long he might have been watching me before I even noticed those footprints. And honestly, I'm not sure which possibility is worse. If that story gave you chills, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more real-life horror stories. And trust me, the last story in this video might be the creepiest one yet. Running out of gas in the middle of nowhere sounds like a small problem. At least, that's what I used to think. Until it happened to me on a road where I'm almost certain I wasn't supposed to stop. A few years ago, I decided to take a long road trip across the Pacific Northwest. It wasn't anything fancy, just a few weeks of driving, visiting small towns, hiking trails, and getting away from the noise of everyday life. I had been driving most of the day through northern Oregon. The highway I was on wasn't one of the major ones. It was the kind of two-lane road that cuts through endless forest with long stretches where you might not see another car for 10 or 15 minutes. The scenery was beautiful, but it was also isolated, very isolated. The trees on both sides of the road were tall and thick, and in some areas they formed a dark canopy over the asphalt. It was late evening when I noticed my gas light turn on. Normally that wouldn't have worried me. Most cars can still drive quite a while after the warning light appears. Just to be safe, I checked my phone and searched for the nearest gas station. According to the map, the closest one was about 45 minutes away. Not ideal, but still manageable. So I kept driving. After about 10 minutes, I glanced down at my phone again. The GPS still said 35 minutes. I didn't think much about it, but another 10 minutes passed, and it still said 35 minutes. That's when I realized something wasn't right. The small car icon on the map wasn't moving anymore. It was frozen in place. At first, I thought my phone had just lost signal for a moment, but when I tried refreshing the route, nothing changed. Right as I was messing with the phone, my car suddenly sputtered. My stomach dropped. I pressed the gas pedal lightly, hoping it was just a brief hiccup. The engine sputtered again, then a third time. And finally, it died completely. The steering wheel locked slightly as the car rolled forward. I quickly guided it toward the side of the road before it came to a stop. For a few seconds, I just sat there in silence. The forest around me looked darker now. Thick fog had started to roll between the trees, creating a hazy wall beyond the edge of the road. I picked up my phone again and tried calling for help. No signal, not even a single bar. Now the frozen GPS finally made sense. I stepped out of the car and looked up and down the empty road. Nothing. No headlights in the distance. No buildings. Just miles of forest in both directions. After thinking about my options for a minute, I realized I didn't really have many choices. If the gas station was even half as close as the GPS originally said, I could probably walk there within an hour or two. Staying with the car all night didn't sound appealing, so I grabbed the small flashlight from my glove compartment, locked the car, and started walking down the road. The air was colder than I expected. My flashlight beam barely cut through the fog ahead of me. The road stretched forward into darkness. Every now and then, I glanced toward the forest, but the trees were so dense that my light couldn't reach very far between them. It was strangely quiet, not peaceful quiet, more like the kind of quiet where it feels like the world is holding its breath. About 5 minutes into the walk, I heard something. A sharp crack, like a branch snapping somewhere in the woods to my right. I stopped walking immediately. The forest went silent again. I slowly turned my flashlight toward the trees. The beam illuminated trunks, bushes, and drifting fog. Nothing moved. After standing there for nearly a minute, I convinced myself it was probably just an animal. Deer? Maybe? Still, the sound had been loud enough that I started walking a little faster. A few minutes later, my flashlight caught something unusual up ahead, a shape near the edge of the road. As I got closer, I realized it was a car, an old sedan. It was partially hidden near the tree line, several yards off the road. The front end faced the forest like someone had slowly driven it down the slope instead of crashing. The driver's door hung slightly open. Even from a distance, I could tell the car had been there for a long time. Dust covered the windows. Leaves and small branches had gathered around the tires. It looked abandoned. Seeing it made me uncomfortable. The idea that someone else had ended up stranded on the same lonely road didn't feel like a coincidence. I kept walking, trying not to stare at it too long. Just as I passed the car, I heard another noise. This one came from deeper in the forest, rustling, like something moving through bushes. I turned instinctively toward the sound. For a moment, I thought the fog was playing tricks on my eyes. Then I saw them. Figures. Several dark shapes moving quickly between the trees. Not animals, people. My entire body went cold. I couldn't see their faces clearly, but there were definitely multiple people running through the forest parallel to the road, and they were moving in the same direction I was walking. I immediately picked up my pace. I didn't run. Something about the situation made me feel like running would only make things worse. Instead, I walked quickly, trying to act calm. But I could hear them now. Footsteps, branches snapping, multiple sets of them. They were keeping up with me. Every instinct in my body screamed at me not to turn around and shine my flashlight at them. So I kept my eyes on the road ahead. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Then suddenly, headlights appeared behind me. A pickup truck pulled up alongside the road and slowed to a stop. The driver rolled down his window. "You all right?" he called out. The man looked like he was in his 50s. Gray beard, worn baseball cap. He didn't look threatening, just tired. "My car ran out of gas," I said, still trying to catch my breath. He glanced down the empty road, then back at me. "You're a long way from the nearest station," he said. "Hop in, I'll give you a ride." For a moment I hesitated, but the forest behind me had gone completely silent. Whatever had been following me wasn't making any noise anymore. That alone was enough to convince me. I opened the passenger door and got in. The man nodded and started driving. He told me he owned a farm about an hour north and used that road frequently. He also said he almost never saw anyone walking out there at night. The drive to the gas station took nearly 25 minutes, which meant the walk would have taken me hours. When we finally arrived, I thanked him repeatedly. He simply gave me a nod, wished me luck, and drove off. Inside the gas station, the clerk suggested I call the local sheriff's office for help getting back to my car. Apparently, they sometimes assisted stranded drivers in remote areas. About 40 minutes later, a deputy drove me back down the same road. As we approached the spot where I had left my car, something immediately felt wrong. My car wasn't where I left it. The deputy slowed down. Then we both saw it. My car had been pushed off the shoulder and partially into the forest, almost the exact same position as the abandoned sedan I had passed earlier. The deputy stepped out and inspected the area with his flashlight. The tire marks made it obvious. Someone had physically pushed the car away from the road, away from where passing drivers might see it. That's when I finally told him everything, about the noises in the woods, about the figures running alongside me, about the abandoned car. The deputy searched the area briefly, but the forest was too dense and too dark to explore much further that night. They filed a report, but nothing ever came of it. No suspects, no nearby houses, and the abandoned sedan didn't have license plates or any identifying information. To this day, I still think about that road. about the people moving through the forest, and about how close I came to being stranded there alone. Because if that pickup truck hadn't shown up exactly when it did, I'm not sure I would have made it back out of those woods. If you love true scary stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.